Dawn breaks over the restless Pacific, 1943. The horizon glows with the first hints of gold, casting long shadows across the steel deck of the USS Essex. The air is thick with salt and anticipation. Deck crews move with practiced urgency, their hands steady despite the tension. Every eye is on the squat, broad-shouldered fighter, poised at the edge of the flight deck. A signal officer raises his paddles. The pilot, a young lieutenant, tightens his grip on the stick. The engine of the Grumman F6F Hellcat snarls, its propeller a blur of raw power. The deck vibrates beneath the aircraft, the promise of speed and strength barely contained. With a final wave, the Hellcat surges forward, wheels thundering over the planks. In seconds, it lifts into the morning sky, climbing with a force that defies belief. Below, sailors shield their eyes, watching the blue shape vanish into the clouds. They know what this means. For the first time, American carriers have a fighter that can outrun, outclimb, and outfight the legendary Japanese Zero, 50 miles per hour faster. A new chapter in the war for the Pacific has begun. In the early years of World War II, the Pacific was a vast, unforgiving battleground. The ocean stretched for thousands of miles, dotted with islands that would become the sites of desperate struggle. Control of the skies was everything. Whoever ruled the air could strike ships, support landings, and decide the fate of entire fleets. At the heart of Japanese air power was the Mitsubishi A6M Zero. Introduced in 1940, the Zero was a revelation. It was fast, agile, and had an extraordinary range. In the hands of skilled pilots, it seemed almost untouchable. At Pearl Harbor, Wake Island, and the Philippines, the Zero swept aside Allied fighters with ease. American pilots, flying outdated Brewster Buffaloes and Grumman F4F Wildcats, found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. The Zero's dominance was not just technical, it was psychological. Stories spread among Allied airmen of Zeros that could turn inside any opponent, climb like a rocket, and vanish into the clouds. The Japanese pilots, many of them veterans of the war in China, were highly trained and fiercely disciplined. Their tactics were aggressive, their confidence unshakable. For the United States Navy, the early months of the war were a time of crisis. Carrier task forces, the backbone of American naval power, were vulnerable. The Wildcat, though rugged and reliable, was slower and less agile than the Zero. American pilots learned to avoid turning dogfights, relying instead on teamwork and hit-and-run tactics. The Thatch Weave, a defensive maneuver developed by Lieutenant Commander John Thatch, became a lifeline for outmatched squadrons. But tactics could only do so much. Losses mounted. The Battle of Coral Sea, the Battle of Midway, and the long, grinding campaign for Guadalcanal all revealed the same truth. The United States needed a new fighter, one that could not just survive against the Zero, but dominate it. The pressure was immense. Every carrier lost, every squadron decimated, was a blow to American hopes in the Pacific. Reports from the front lines were grim. Pilots described the Zero's uncanny ability to appear out of nowhere, strike, and disappear before they could react. The Wildcat's 50 caliber guns could bring down a Zero, but only if the pilot could get a shot. Too often, the opportunity never came. In Washington and Pearl Harbor, the search for a solution became urgent. The Navy needed a fighter that could match the Zero in speed and agility, but also bring something more: protection, firepower, and the ability to take punishment and keep fighting. The answer would come from a small team of engineers on Long Island, led by a man whose vision would change the course of the war. The stage was set for a new chapter in the Pacific Air War. The legend of the Zero was about to be challenged by American innovation and determination. On Long Island, New York, the Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation was already a trusted name in naval aviation. Their F4F Wildcat had held the line in the Pacific's darkest days, earning a reputation for ruggedness and reliability. But by 1942, it was clear that something more was needed. The Navy's call was urgent. Design a new fighter, one that could not just compete with the Zero, but surpass it in every way. At the heart of this challenge was Grumman's chief engineer, Leroy Grumman. A quiet, methodical man, Grumman was known for his hands-on approach and his deep understanding of what carrier pilots needed. He listened to the stories coming back from the front, accounts of Zeros that seemed to dance through the sky, of Wildcats that could take hits but struggled to keep up. He knew that the next generation of fighter would have to be faster, tougher, and deadlier. The design process began in the spring of 1942. Grumman's team worked around the clock, sketching, testing, and refining. They studied every detail of the Zero, analyzing its strengths and weaknesses. The answer, they realized, was not to copy the Japanese design, but to build something fundamentally different. The new fighter would be heavier, with a more powerful engine and greater firepower. It would be able to absorb damage and bring its pilot home. The breakthrough came with the decision to use the Pratt & Whitney R2800 double Wasp engine, a massive 2,000-horsepower powerhouse that would give the new fighter a top speed over 370 miles per hour, more than 50 Meinhof faster than the Zero. The airframe was designed to be strong and forgiving, with wide landing gear for carrier operations and armor to protect the pilot and fuel tanks. 650 caliber Browning machine guns would give it a devastating punch. The prototype, designated the F6F first flew in June 1942. But Grumman was not satisfied. When reports came in that the Zero was even faster than expected, the team made a bold decision. They would redesign the Hellcat around the even more powerful R2800 Changers, Andre-Tonerand. The result was the F6F3, a fighter that combined speed, firepower, and survivability in a way no carrier aircraft ever had. Production began at a feverish pace. Grumman's factory, known as the Iron Works, became a symbol of American industrial might. Workers turned out Hellcats by the hundreds, each one a testament to the vision and determination of the engineers who built it. The first squadrons received their new fighters in the summer of 1943. Pilots were astonished by the Hellcat's performance. It was fast, stable, and forgiving, a machine that inspired confidence from the moment it left the deck. The arrival of the Hellcat marked a turning point. For the first time, American carrier pilots had a fighter that could meet the Zero on equal terms and, in many ways, surpass it. The stage was set for a new era in the Pacific Air War, one defined by speed, power, and the relentless drive to overcome. The men who built and flew the Hellcat were about to test their creation in the crucible of combat, where every advantage would be measured in lives and victories. Inside the Grumman Iron Works, the atmosphere was electric. Engineers, draftsmen, and assembly workers all felt the pressure of the war. Every blueprint, every rivet, every test flight carried the weight of men's lives thousands of miles away. Leroy Grumman, though reserved, was a constant presence on the factory floor. He believed in practical solutions, designs that could be built quickly, repaired easily, and flown by young men with only months of training. The team worked long hours, often sleeping at their desks. They read combat reports from the Pacific, learning what worked and what failed. When a pilot wrote that a cockpit was too cramped or a gun jammed under stress, the engineers listened. They knew that every improvement could mean the difference between life and death. The Hellcat was not just a machine. It was a promise to the pilots who would trust it with their lives. Test pilots, too, played a crucial role. Men like Butch O'Hare and Jimmy Flatley pushed the prototypes to their limits, reporting every quirk and flaw. Their feedback was direct and sometimes brutal, but it was exactly what Grumman's team needed. The result was a fighter that felt like an extension of the pilot's will, responsive, stable, and forgiving even in the chaos of combat. The Hellcat's speed was not an accident. It was the product of relentless engineering and a willingness to take risks. The decision to use the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine was bold. This 18-cylinder radial was one of the most powerful engines of its time, delivering over 2,000 horsepower. But raw power alone was not enough. The airframe had to be strong enough to handle the stress, yet light enough to maintain agility. Grumman's engineers used innovative construction techniques, including flush riveting and reinforced spars, to create a structure that was both robust and aerodynamic. The wide, straight wings gave the Hellcat excellent lift and stability, crucial for carrier landings and high-speed maneuvers. The cockpit was raised for better visibility, and armor plating was added to protect the pilot from enemy fire. The result was a fighter that could reach speeds of 380 miles per hour, over 50 mph faster than the Zero. It could climb rapidly, dive with confidence, and absorb punishment that would cripple lesser planes. Maintenance crews found it easy to repair, even after heavy damage. The Hellcat was not just faster, it was tougher, safer, and more reliable than anything the Japanese could field. Speed changed everything. With the Hellcat, American pilots could dictate the terms of engagement. No longer forced to fight on the Zero's terms, they could use their superior speed to climb above the enemy, attack from advantage, and break away at will. The old defensive tactics, like the thatch weave, remained useful, but now the initiative belonged to the Americans. Carrier doctrine evolved rapidly. Squadrons trained to operate in coordinated groups, using radio communication and disciplined formations. The Hellcat's firepower, 650 caliber machine guns, meant that a single burst could bring down even the most agile opponent. Pilots learned to strike hard and fast, then climb away before the enemy could react. The psychological effect was immediate. Japanese pilots, once the hunters, now found themselves on the defensive. The Hellcat's speed and resilience gave American air groups a new confidence. For the first time, carrier task forces could project air power deep into enemy territory, secure in the knowledge that their fighters could meet and defeat the best Japan had to offer. The transformation was underway, but the story of the Hellcat's impact was only beginning to unfold. Behind every leap in technology stands a leader willing to take risks. For the U.S. Navy, that leadership came from men like Admiral Ernest King and Admiral John S. McCain. They understood that the Pacific War would be won or lost in the air above the fleet. King, as Chief of Naval Operations, pushed for rapid development and deployment of new aircraft. He demanded that Grumman deliver not just a replacement for the Wildcat, but a fighter that would change the balance of power. The Navy's Bureau of Aeronautics worked closely with Grumman, providing feedback from the front lines and ensuring that the Hellcat met the real needs of carrier pilots. There was no time for perfectionism. Combat experience drove every decision. When the first Hellcats arrived in the fleet, the Navy's faith in Grumman's team was vindicated. The aircraft was not just a technical success, it was a strategic weapon, delivered on time and ready for war. This partnership between engineers and admirals was rare, but it was essential. The Navy's willingness to trust Grumman's vision, to invest in speed and survivability, set a new standard for military innovation. The Hellcat was the result of that trust, a machine built not just for today's battle, but for the changing face of war. For Japanese aviators, the arrival of the Hellcat was a shock that reverberated through every squadron. The Zero had been the pride of the Imperial Navy, a symbol of technological and tactical superiority. But by late 1943, reports from the front were grim. Pilots described encounters with a new American fighter, one that could outclimb, outdive, and outrun the Zero. The Hellcat's speed was a revelation, its firepower devastating. Japanese commanders struggled to adapt. Training programs, once the envy of the world, were now rushed and under-resourced. The loss of experienced pilots in earlier battles left a void that could not be filled. New tactics were tried, mass attacks, ambushes, even suicide missions, but nothing could reverse the tide. The Zero, designed for a different era, was now outclassed by a machine that embodied the lessons of hard combat. The psychological impact was profound. Morale suffered as losses mounted. The myth of the invincible Zero was gone, replaced by a grim determination to fight on, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The Hellcat had not just changed the battlefield, it had changed the very spirit of the enemy. Beneath the statistics and the headlines, the story of the Hellcat is a story of people, engineers who worked through the night, pilots who risked everything, and enemies who faced a new and terrifying reality. Every advance in speed and firepower came at a cost. For American pilots, the Hellcat was a lifeline, a machine that brought many home who might otherwise have been lost. For Japanese pilots, it was a harbinger of defeat, a reminder that no advantage lasts forever. The war in the Pacific was a crucible of innovation and sacrifice. The Hellcat's success was measured not just in victories, but in lives saved and lost. It was a testament to the power of human ingenuity and a sobering reminder of the price of war. As the Hellcat entered combat in greater numbers, the stage was set for a confrontation that would decide the fate of the Pacific. November 23, 1943. The sky above Tarawa is a patchwork of cloud and sunlight, the air thick with the smell of salt and cordite. Below, the coral atoll is a battlefield, smoke rising from shattered bunkers, the surf stained with the cost of amphibious assault. Offshore, the decks of American carriers are alive with activity. The F6F Hellcat, still new to many pilots, is about to face its first true test. The Battle of Tarawa is more than a fight for a tiny island. It is a test of American resolve, of amphibious doctrine, and of the Navy's new weapon. Japanese defenders, dug in and determined, have called for air support. From distant bases, Zeros and bombers race to the scene, intent on breaking the American beachhead. Hellcat squadrons launch in waves, engines roaring as they climb into the morning sky. Pilots check their guns, scan the horizon, and steel themselves for the unknown. Many have never faced the Zero in combat. They know the stories of dogfights lost, of friends who never returned. But today, they have an edge. The Hellcat's speed and firepower are unmatched. The first enemy formation appears, sunlight glinting off wings as Zeros dive toward the fleet. The Hellcats respond instantly, climbing to intercept. The two forces meet in a swirling melee above the lagoon. Tracers stitch the sky, engines scream, and the air is filled with the chaos of battle. For the first time, American pilots find themselves not just surviving, but dominating. The Hellcat's speed allows them to choose when and where to fight. They dive on the Zeros, unleash devastating bursts from their .650 caliber guns, and climb away before the enemy can react. The Zero, so deadly in the early years, now struggles to keep up. Reports from the battle are clear. The Hellcat is a revelation. Pilots return to their carriers with stories of victories, of Zeros shot down, of bombers turned back, of a new confidence in the air. The numbers tell the story. In the skies over Tarawa, the Hellcat claims dozens of enemy aircraft for minimal losses. The impact is immediate. The Japanese, caught off guard by the Hellcat's speed and resilience, are forced to rethink their tactics. The myth of the Zero's invincibility is broken. For the first time, American carrier air groups hold the initiative. But the battle is not over. The lessons of Tarawa will be tested again and again, as the Hellcat leads the way across the Central Pacific. The success at Tarawa is only the beginning. In the months that follow, the Hellcat becomes the spearhead of every major American carrier operation. The Central Pacific Campaign accelerates. Kwajalein, Eniwetok, Truk, and the Marianas. Each new battle brings fresh challenges, but the pattern is unmistakable. Wherever the Hellcat appears, the balance of power shifts. Carrier decks are now dominated by the blue-gray shapes of the F6F. Pilots, once cautious, now launch with confidence. The Hellcat's speed, over 50 miles per hour faster than the Zero, means American squadrons can intercept enemy raids before they reach the fleet. The days of desperate last-minute defense are over. Now, the Americans are the hunters. In the skies above Truk in February 1944, the Hellcat's dominance is on full display. Japanese airfields are pounded, enemy fighters rise to meet the threat, and are swept from the sky. The Hellcat's firepower is overwhelming. Pilots report multiple kills in a single sortie. The Zero, once the terror of the Pacific, is now outclassed in every engagement. The transformation is not just tactical, it is strategic. The U.S. Navy's carrier groups, protected by Hellcats, can operate with impunity. They strike at will, supporting amphibious landings, destroying enemy shipping, and isolating Japanese garrisons. The Japanese, unable to contest the air, are forced into a defensive posture. Their carriers, once the pride of the fleet, are now targets. The psychological shift is profound. American pilots, many of them barely out of training, now feel the advantage. The Hellcat is forgiving, able to absorb damage and bring its pilot home. Morale soars. The lessons learned in the dark days of 1942 are now weapons in their own right, discipline, teamwork, and the relentless pursuit of improvement. For the Japanese, the impact is devastating. The loss of experienced pilots cannot be replaced. Training programs are rushed, new recruits sent into battle with only the basics. The Zero, designed for a different war, is now a relic. Its speed and agility are no longer enough. By the summer of 1944, the transformation is complete. The Battle of the Philippine Sea, known as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot, sees the Hellcat at the height of its power. Hundreds of Japanese aircraft are destroyed, the backbone of the Imperial Navy's air arm broken in a single day. The Hellcat's speed, firepower, and resilience have changed the very nature of carrier warfare. The Pacific skies belong to a new master. The era of the Zero is over. The Hellcat, born from the vision of a quiet engineer and the determination of a nation at war, has become the symbol of American air superiority. The consequences of this transformation will echo through the final year of the Pacific War, shaping every battle and every decision that follows. In the wake of the Hellcat's rise, the Pacific Air War enters a new phase. The numbers are stark, and they tell a story of overwhelming dominance. By the end of 1944, the F6F Hellcat has claimed more than 4,000 enemy aircraft destroyed, most of them Zeros. The kill-to-loss ratio is staggering. For every Hellcat lost in combat, nearly 13 Japanese planes fall. No other Allied fighter in the Pacific comes close. Carrier task forces, once vulnerable to sudden attack, now operate with near impunity. The Hellcat's speed and range allow American squadrons to sweep the skies clear before bombers and torpedo planes even launch. The Japanese, unable to contest the air, watch as their bases are bombed, their ships sunk, and their supply lines severed. The tide of the war has turned, and the Hellcat is at the forefront. The impact on Japanese aviation is catastrophic. The Zero, once the pride of the Imperial Navy, is now a symbol of lost opportunity. Its design, revolutionary in 1940, is hopelessly outclassed by 1944. Attempts to upgrade the Zero with more powerful engines and better armament come too late. The airframes cannot handle the extra weight, and the new models are plagued by reliability issues. Worse still is the loss of experienced pilots. The battles of 1943 and 1944 have decimated the ranks of Japan's best aviators. Training programs, once rigorous and selective, are now rushed and desperate. Young pilots are sent into combat with only the barest essentials, facing Hellcats flown by men with months of experience and the best training American industry can provide. The psychological effect is profound. American pilots, once wary of the Zero, now fly with confidence. The Hellcat's reputation grows with every victory. Stories circulate through the fleet of pilots returning with their planes riddled with holes, of dogfights won against impossible odds, of a machine that seems almost indestructible. For the Japanese, the sense of inevitability grows. The Zero, for all its early glory, is now a target. The Imperial Navy's carrier air arm, once the terror of the Pacific, is shattered. The few remaining aces fight on, but the outcome is no longer in doubt. The Hellcat's dominance is not just a matter of numbers. It is a symbol of American adaptation, of the ability to learn from defeat and turn it into victory. The Pacific Campaign, once a desperate struggle for survival, is now a relentless advance toward Japan itself. The legacy of the Hellcat is secure, but the war is not yet over. The final battles will test the limits of men and machines alike. As 1945 dawns, the Pacific War enters its final, brutal phase. The Hellcat, now the backbone of every American carrier air group, continues to shape the outcome of every major operation. From the Philippines to Iwo Jima and Okinawa, its blue silhouette is a constant presence in the sky. The numbers continue to climb. By VJ Day, the F6F Hellcat has destroyed over 5,000 enemy aircraft, more than any other Allied fighter in the Pacific theater. But the true legacy of the Hellcat is not just in victories tallied or enemies vanquished. It is in the standard it sets for all carrier fighters to come. Grumman's design philosophy, robustness, ease of maintenance, pilot protection, and overwhelming firepower becomes the blueprint for future generations. The lessons learned in the ironworks of Long Island echo through every hangar and flight deck for decades. The Zero, once the symbol of Japanese air power, fades into history. Attempts to field new Japanese fighters like the N-1K Shiden and the Kai-84 Hayate come too late and in too few numbers to change the course of the war. The Hellcat's speed, resilience, and adaptability have set a new bar, one that the enemy cannot reach. For the men who built the Hellcat, the war is both a triumph and a burden. Leroy Grumman and his team watch as their creation becomes a legend, but they never forget the stakes. Every improvement, every innovation, was paid for in the currency of lives saved and lost. The partnership between Grumman and the Navy, forged in the urgency of war, becomes a model for military-industry cooperation in the years ahead. On the American side, the Hellcat's reputation is secure. Pilots who once feared the Zero now speak of the Hellcat with reverence. It is the plane that brought them home, the machine that turned the tide. Its influence is felt not just in the Pacific, but in the very doctrine of carrier warfare. The idea that a carrier fighter must be fast, tough, and easy to fly becomes gospel. The end of the war brings reflection. The Hellcat, born from necessity and shaped by the hands of ordinary men and women, stands as a testament to what can be achieved when innovation meets determination. The Zero's era is over, but its legacy endures, in the lessons it taught and in the fighter that finally surpassed it. The Pacific is quiet now, but the story of the Hellcat and the men who built and flew it will echo through history. In the quiet after the storm, the story of the Hellcat endures not just as a machine of war, but as a symbol of what happens when necessity meets ingenuity. The Pacific skies, once ruled by the elegant lines of the Zero, became the proving ground for a new philosophy, that survival and victory belong to those who adapt, who listen, And who dare to build something better? Leroy Grumman and his team did not set out to create a legend. They set out to solve a problem, to answer the desperate call of pilots fighting for their lives far from home. Every decision, every late-night revision was driven by the knowledge that real men would trust their lives to what they built. The Hellcat was not the fastest or the most beautiful fighter ever made, but it was the right machine at the right moment. Strong, forgiving, and deadly. For the pilots, the Hellcat was more than metal and rivets. It was a lifeline, a partner in the sky, a reason to believe that the next mission might not be their last. For the Navy, it was proof that American industry and innovation could meet any challenge, no matter how daunting. For the enemy, it was a harbinger of change, a reminder that no advantage lasts forever. The legacy of the Hellcat is not just in the victories it won, but in the spirit it represents. It is the story of ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges, of engineers and pilots, leaders and workers, all bound by a common purpose. In the end, the Hellcat's greatest triumph was not in the enemies it defeated, but in the hope it gave to those who believed that the impossible could be overcome. The war in the Pacific faded into memory, but the lesson remains. Innovation, courage, and the will to adapt can change the course of history.